Hello, I am Leron Brummel. Thanks very much for joining me. I've got a special guest this evening, Vice President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Bharat Jagdeo. Dr. Jagdeo, thanks very much for taking some time out to chat with us here on NCN. How are you?
I'm good. A bit busy, but good generally. You know, when you're in opposition, you have a bit more time. And although there are many issues, and you see a lot of people in opposition, you tend not to have to implement things, and therefore you have more time to do public relations work and to do more advocacy, and people tend to see you a bit more in the public domain. So a lot of people have been calling me to say, we don't see you often in the media, and we don't see your regular press conferences, and what's happening? Are you ill, or are you doing something else? And I just want them to understand that the primary purpose of government is to deliver on its promises, to move the country forward, to ensure that they improve their lives or create the conditions to improve their lives of all the people of the country. And so we are busy working towards that, getting the plans, programs, the things that we promised implemented. And we have a far-reaching vision for this country. We had defined this vision in several documents in the past, working on the National Development Strategy, then the Low Carbon Development Strategy, the Poverty Reduction Strategy, the National Competitiveness Strategy. And if you group all of those together and you see how they have evolved over time, they all had a far-reaching view of where we want to take Guyana. Unfortunately, that momentum died a bit, and the upward trajectory leveled off in the last 5 years. And had APNU just continued with the plans rather than try to reinvent things, or if they had only focused more on implementing initiatives, our country would have been far advanced on that agenda. It's almost like having to reboot the agenda now and to get things that we thought were clearly and evidently beneficial to the country and would be embraced by everyone, that those things would have been implemented without the politics coming in between, like the Amaila Hydrofall project. But the politics got involved and they killed that project. And therefore we now have to go back and start the agenda. So that is, in a nutshell, what has been happening. We're extremely busy trying to get that agenda going. And we could have taken a relaxed attitude, say, oh, it's COVID, let the entire government go into a lockdown mode, don't see ministers. I saw APNU in their 100 days plan that gave us a F. And one of the 100 things is that ministers contracted COVID. We got an F for that because 2 ministers contracted COVID. COVID is a pandemic, anyone can get it. But the government had to make a conscious decision to go out and meet people again. And I'm very much aware about the people who come out to those meetings. They are fearful about catching the coronavirus. And also the ministers and others who go out, they also have families and they have fear. But our country demands it. Too many people are suffering, and a lot of the people who come out there, because they have real issues to address, and whether it's NIS or a land issue, or simply a fact that they need a job. So we've had to brave the pandemic and try to create a semblance of normalcy although nothing is normal about this crisis, the pandemic that we're in, but so that more and more people can go back to work, reopening our airport so our tourism sector can pick up, more people can travel back. I spoke with one person who had laid off. He has 300 staff. He laid off 250 of them, and he said, since the airport reopened and we opened up, extended the curfew hours, he's rehired all of them. That's 250 people back to work, and this is a medium scale business.
Right.
So that sort of thing we're working on, but so people would not see us so much in the public domain.
Vice President, you said a lot of things in your opening
Yeah.
statement. Let me go back to the first one as I pull out here. You spoke about the trajectory, and then we panned off for 5 years, and now we're trying to come back
Yeah.
up. And this more comes down to what Parliamentary Government Affairs Minister Teixeira had said in the earlies. Parliamentary diplomacy and maturity. Do you think it is time for us as a nation to sit down to say, this is the trajectory we want to go on, regardless of whoever's in government? I asked this having lived in Trinidad and Tobago for a while, and there is a continuity, a push to Trinidad want to develop country status in 2020, and it fell down. And so I'm asking at this stage, is there a discussion to come in the future where politicians from across the country can sit down and chart a way for Guyana to move forward?
Okay, we tried to achieve that through first of all, the National Development Strategy. When I included people, Dr. Jagan asked me to be in charge of the initiative. I was at finance. And then we got Dr. Kenneth King, who was one-time General Secretary of APNU, to work through civil society on the document too, with a group of people in civil society. And then we asked for it to be debated in the National Assembly so it would be adopted as a country document. Unfortunately, that faltered. And then we did the same thing with almost every strategy we have done so far. We have had widespread consultations. The documents have been tabled in Parliament for discussion. Often it's not about the generic acceptance of a document. You know, Parliament tends to adopt documents without, so they may adopt a national plan. But when you're in office, your fidelity to that plan is tested. And if you are not guided by the lofty ideals of the plan, you fall prey immediately to a very partisan approach at implementing initiatives with this desire to negate everything that was done in the past. And that is what happened. It's not as though our country didn't know we needed to have a cheaper source of energy, a baseload system. And the easiest way to do that would have been the Mile Hydrofoil project.
Right.
But what happened? APNU in opposition said, oh, it's a terrible project, fraught with corruption. When they got in, Norway did a review, and the review said this is the best way of achieving, your renewable targets, but cutting your costs. The power cost would have been by 50% lower. We would have saved hundreds of millions of dollars on the balance of payment side. We would have added about 2 or 3 percentage points to GDP growth in the construction period. You had more, we were going to nearly double the amount of energy or base load capacity we had. All of that was known. And yet there was no attempt to do it. So what happened? 5 years later, APNU worked on a few tiny things like solar, a small solar system here or something here. But we don't have baseload investment and hence blackouts. So that is that is what happened. The partisan thing. So we had our low carbon development strategy. We earned a lot of money. It was to demonstrate an alternate path to prosperity. And it had a means of earning money and then financing initiatives. So they thought, well, let's scrap that and go for a green state economy strategy. But the green state strategy is that so consultants were brought in, international organization. We produced a document that is good, lofty in ideals, but it's not practical, has no program or policy or means of financing it to achieve the lofty objectives. And so it is, again, so we parked another initiative. So what I'm talking about is not just acceptance of this pathway that we need to work together, but fidelity to the plan when you have power. And like the Constitution, people talk about constitutional changes, the need for constitutional changes. But we had a constitution that clearly outlined how the head of GECOM should be appointed. President Hoyt, when he became leader of the opposition, on several occasions, and other leaders of the PNC accepted that, and we followed that constitution for 25 years without any hint of disagreement as to how that appointment should take place. So it's not the flaw in the Constitution. Then President Granger comes along and he has a totally different view and implements that, puts the country through trauma. We had to go all the way to the Caribbean Court of Justice to have it reversed. It's not the Constitution that is flawed, because the two parties had a clear understanding and implemented it throughout that entire period for 25 years. But then someone comes along with a capricious understanding of how it should operate and does it in a very partisan manner and violates that. So that's why when I see a lot of people calling for constitutional changes, they have not really gone through the far-reaching constitutional changes we made in 2001 to have an inclusive government at the level of the legislature, empowering opposition parties to have a greater role in the agenda of the country. And that is what we did consciously in the 2001 changes. So for example, we established several commissions, the 4 standing committees on the natural resources, the environment, social services, foreign affairs, and economic services. So these are 4 standing committees. We agreed to rotate the chair. We will chair 2, or the government will chair 2, the opposition will chair 2. In the United States of America and other places, if you're in power, you have the majority, you chair all the committees. We decided we will rotate, we will have the parties share the chairmanship and then rotate the chairs. So that was one way how you have inclusion. And those standing committees have the power of reviewing government policies in all of these areas: social services, natural resources, foreign affairs, and economic services. Very far-reaching. We've never put those committees to full use. You asked me about the legislature earlier. Then the constitutional commissions. We've established 5 rights commission and the procurement commission. Then the service commissions, the police service, teaching service, judicial service commissions, etc., the 4 commissions there. we had a greater say from Parliament to name the commissions and less so from the executive. I can go on about all of these changes. So coming back to the point, I see the need for us as a country to settle on one agenda for the future, an agenda that progressively takes us upwards, and that parties can then all subscribe, play the politics, but still subscribe to the overarching economic agenda. So I see the need for that. We still have to, notwithstanding the fact that all of the efforts we may have failed, we still have to reach out and have that done. The problem now is that we don't have a honest interlocutor on the other side, because you do have internal turmoil in APNU at this point in time. And if you look at the negative, it's almost infantile, the politics they're playing. I've seen this like 100 days thing card, the report card, and only a child would write like this. Well, not a serious political party.
Therefore,
no, and child. But I'm saying that to have an honest interlocutor, you have to have somebody across the table from you who will say, we'll go through bumpy times together, but I can give a commitment and keep that commitment from my side. That's the only way you can have negotiations. I'm not sure that Harman can do that, given what has happened, the pathway to which they have, or how the recent dealings with his own party. So a lot of the people who are placed as members of parliament are not hardcore, well, they didn't come out of the party structures. They were rewarded for loyalty to Harman. And Mr. Granger, because he is head of the list, he put them as parliamentarians. So a lot of the other people got excluded from parliament, like Valda Lawrence, Norton and stuff. So when are they going to be sitting aside? They'd have a Congress upcoming, and I know Mr. Granger and Mr. Harman have been going out extensively now trying to diminish Valda's chance of getting back up. So there's that work, and a party work going on, Mr. Granger helping Mr. Harman hopefully to emerge. But who do we speak with on the other side?
Which would have been my next question.
Right.
Who do you see on that side as being this quote-unquote honest interlocutor?
That is it. At this point in time, I can't see a single individual who can stand up and say, we speak for the collective, and we are going to make some commitments here about working together, and that in the future, and then that person has the ability to defend and have the party accept those commitments. So that is hard too when you try to engage in a dialogue, which is what we promised in our manifesto and throughout the period. And even now, it's very important for us talking about the future. But you have to have people to talk with who are not more concerned about defending illegalities. So when we have a clear case of a transfer, for example, of a transfer of land worth $1 billion to a private individual, where they vested the title in the person's name, and the person has not paid a cent, although there is a payment schedule in the contract. That's criminal. That person has to be charged. Now, along comes Mr. Norton, and he says, don't transfer back the land, don't give up the land to the government. Now, here is a party saying that a person can get $1 billion worth, based on their valuation, $1 billion, get a piece of land worth $1 billion, vested, already have the title to it, doesn't pay a cent, and that person must not give up back their land. That's their party's position now. They're defending the illegalities. That is what APNU is about doing now, the opposition. I can give you about 30 cases where that happened. That's just off the top of my head. And where it happened blatantly. For example, President Granger never gave Trevor Benn the right to sell land. We look at the instrument. You have to publish it in the Gazette. He never had the right to dispose of land, just to lease the land on. He's exercising that responsibility on behalf of the president. The president has delegated the responsibility because it's the minister who is the president under the act that has that responsibility, leasing lands, etc. Never given to him. But this gentleman sold a ton of land to individuals at prices that are unbelievable. So who is to be blamed now? So we have to now ask President Granger, did you authorize this through a side letter or so, all of these sales? Because we think a lot of the sales are illegal too. They lack transparency, etc. There's a lease at Ogle for 200 acres of land. And in the lease document, it doesn't say where the 200 acres are leased. And this is what, I don't want to belabor those points, but this is precisely what APNU is doing now, defending. Their position should be where there is illegality, people have to face the music. This is what we said when we were in opposition. If there is any illegality committed under the PPP, and you remember they were complaining about us, etc., people will they have to face the law. That is what they should be saying. But many of the people who are in opposition now, and many of the MPs, were part of this illegality because they were the lawyers for the transactions, or they're the beneficiaries of the transactions. And to large sums of money, exceeding millions of US dollars, I'm talking about. And all of that will unfold in the future. So we don't have, from the other side, any attempt to engage on a serious issue or an agenda for the future. They're still busy defending the illegal deals.
You say all of this, Vice President, and you may have touched on it as you passed it. You said illegalities, and we are going to sit down and deal with this. But for a regular man looking out in the street, he's going to say, well, you're just saying things. Which body is there, a body, quote unquote, competent enough in Guyana to look into these such things that you've raised that can, if that's what we're saying, bring prosecutions and find the truth in this? Or do we have to look outside?
This is the police. The police are responsible ultimately for the investigation. So what happens is that when we have, like in NISIL, we get all the files, we look at the files, we have lawyers advising the corporation or the company, and then you see an illegal transaction. It has to go now to the police. It would be either through the regular arm or through SOCO, and then they do the full investigations. They have to give people the right of response. They have to invite them in for statements and stuff, and then the files would have to go to the DPP to decide whether you charge or not. So that has to happen. That's a process. But clearly, what we have seen and what we know, we know that it amounts to grave malfeasance in office, and it's unbelievable what you've seen. I'm even lost. I don't want to be overly harsh, but it's criminal behavior with no regard for any impunity. I don't even believe that some of these people thought that these transactions will ever see the light of day. That is the only reason why they pursue them. And I can give you 30 of them now that we have, at least 30. And we have not touched the tip of the iceberg as yet. And Guyanese of every political persuasion, every race will be outraged because that's their asset. That's our asset. And to see how they were given to individuals in large scales, and this is with proof, not like a general, there were lots of allegations against the PPP too. And they had all these years, 5 years, to prove those allegations. They never managed to. We will be able to prove this in a matter of days. In a matter of days, we can do this. We can show you the documents. So, but we didn't want to get stuck on that agenda. That is why you have not seen, they had an obsession with doing this, coming after the PPP. They looked at every bank account. They hire companies to check our assets abroad. They looked at everything. But that seems to be all that they were doing, and now forgot that you have to manage, and you have to, when you're in government, people look to you to solve their problems. And this is what we've been focusing on, trying to reboot the economy, because that's the first order of priority, getting more of our people working or back to work, and then trying to get as much assistance as we can to them immediately. That's why we devised this $25,000 per household assistance. It's going on now.
Are you satisfied with the way that is?
It is.
Government
it
satisfied
is very
with the
hard.
way it is being rolled out at this point?
We did it per household to avoid this argument. We couldn't do a means test because we said all of our people should get it, every person. So APNU is finding it difficult now because they were started off by saying, when we said we're going to give it out, that we're going to discriminate against people, the people who voted APNU. And we said, how could you discriminate if we're going to every home? Every single home in Guyana will get this. Now, we had another issue of how do we deal with homes where you have multiple families. And if you give people 100 packages of $25,000, you're going to have 10 persons claiming they have their own pot in the home. They cook their own pot. So we said we're going to give one for every household. So that's easy to audit. If we go to a village or a ward in the city, we can count how many households are there. So we say 50 houses in this block, only 50 envelopes. And then you fill a pink slip. And then we come back now and send a team to investigate whether it's really 4 families in the household. And if there are 4 families, they will get 2. So of the 110 packages that have been delivered so far, 110,000 households, 110, we have had 11,000 pink slips filled out. So it's about 10% more.
Okay.
11,000 pink slips. And we have not completed all the regions. Today, I think Region 5 will start, and then we'll come to Region 4, which is the big region, to get it done, because all the other regions have moved forward with this or about to be completed. Once we complete 5, then we'd start in Region 4.
Given the uncertainty of this pandemic and this initial tranche that you're giving out of $25,000 per household, the question comes up, should this move into another 6-7 months? Is government prepared, or is government projecting that they may have to offer more assistance to,
we are
to the
programming
nation?
Some reimbursements through our retroactive financing, some reimbursements for early expenditure. And we're already trying to target more help to households and vulnerable families. So in the future, we're hoping also that we can get the vaccines early. We're putting a lot of effort into this. I saw Moderna today, the news on Moderna, that they said that their vaccine has a 95% efficacy. The Pfizer one had a 90% efficacy. And the good thing about it, if that's so, is that vaccine could be stored in at minus 20 degrees. That means in a regular fridge for 30 days. The Moderna vaccine, you had to have a special cold storage facility, right, at minus 80 degrees. So it would allow you to store the vaccine and then get it out quickly. So we are hoping, we're praying that the vaccine comes out early, a vaccine of that nature, and that we can get it. We have the resources to buy it, but the supplies, might not be available in the early period, and that all of our people can get vaccinated. So if that happens, we're hoping that the first quarter of next year, maybe a lot will get vaccinated. Then we will hopefully have turned the corner on the pandemic and life can go back to normalcy. So we're planning for future tranches, helping more, but we're hopeful that you can, get people working in our country back to normalcy even before then, the need for that. But on the other hand, we're also trying to get more money into people's pockets by the pension. For example, the pension books are going out now for 2021. So they have to do some work. I spoke with the minister about getting more places where pensioners can collect their books. Because rather now, yes, post office, and they put in the papers and a list of places. But we're trying to increase that. And in the hinterland, it's a promise we made on the campaign trail, because sometimes people have to come out from the villages, use a boat to come to Central Point. It's very costly for them to do that, to collect their pensions, etc. So we're doing more mobile distribution in the hinterland. But that will put about $17.7 billion in the pockets of pensioners. And because we've increased it by about 20%, it moved from 20,000 to 25,000 now, that people will be getting another close to $4 billion more than they're getting this year, pensioners. So because of that increase, that a 5% or a $5,000 increase per pensioner is equivalent to nearly $4 billion more when you multiply by the number of pensioners we have, which is close to 60,000 pensioners. So we're hoping that they would get more, at least incrementally $4 billion more in their pockets that they didn't have this year. And the same thing with the school uniform. We doubled that in the last budget. So that put in the pockets of the families another maybe about $400 million more, because we've doubled the school uniform voucher, the school uniform. Next year, we are also increasing the 10,000 grant by $5,000 more, right? So it will go to 15,000 per child. So a lot of these things that were not there before, right, or at a smaller scale, we're hoping by giving this out that you'll have billions of dollars more flowing into the pockets of our families that have children and everything else, so that they spend this money back in the economy too. So you see more economic activities. A number of people have told us since we relaxed a bit on the curfew, etc., that they've seen businesses doubling and stuff like that.
Doctor, you talk about giving out. How is the country taking in? Where are you getting the money from? And I know this is where you're going to get comfortable in terms of telling me how the finances work.
Yeah, sure.
But you're talking about granting and giving and moving. But how is Ghana making money? Are we going to be, our sectors stronger or going to be stronger with, and let's not look at oil by itself as yet. Our sector strong enough for us to bring this money in, and then when we add oil to it, is that the backup for it?
So clearly, in this year's budget, there is a continuation of some borrowing, because the borrowing escalated And this is a result of two things. We have spent a lot of money on things that don't deliver welfare to people. So I've been very critical of the last government when I said they couldn't find $1.5 billion to keep the school kids grant, the 10,000 grant. They said they couldn't afford it. But dietary in government went up by $1.6 billion more per year. That is food in government. When renting of buildings for government increased by $1 billion above 2014, I'm talking above the last budget we passed when we left office, it increased by $1 billion more per year, renting buildings for government. We had the Department of Environment that was renting a building on Main Street for $800,000, and a climate change department here in the office of the president. And I've just merged the two. And with a view to getting more work done, and we gave up the rental. That will save us $800,000 more per month.
Per month.
Right? And imagine that's happening all around the place. And so that is how you have to move. Vehicle maintenance and stuff. So a lot of the money escalated in things in the last 5 years on a whole range of things and agencies that were not producing welfare for people. Look at SOCU. We've terminated SOCU. But SOCU probably would spend $600 million a year. Not SOCU, SARA. But SARA never recovered. This was a state asset recovery agency. Never recovered a cent of money from persons who were supposed to have stolen the money. Not a cent. And you spending $600 million a year on it. And it's best to just terminate it and then try to, like what I'm talking about. If you see people who have really stolen the assets, go after them directly through the criminal justice system. But not small people, because a lot of small people were engaged in some little thing. I think we set a cutoff at some stage. You have to do that because it's better to go after the masterminds than some people who got caught up. Fish. Yes, the little fish. I know people who were stealing stationery and stuff like that. We don't have time for all of that sort of stuff. Although it's bad, but you can't because it was tolerated. But that's what I'm speaking about. So a lot of the strain on the budget came because of this rapid growth in recurrent expenditure, but not recurrent expenditure that ended up in people's pockets. Like our children. In fact, they took from our children to fund this. That is why when President Granger was saying about the buses, the 5Bs program, I said, if you take $1.6 billion a year and multiply it by 5 years, that's about $8 billion that our children lost because you took away the $10,000. So how many buses we could have bought 1,500 buses with that money, and you're saying that I gave 20 buses and they were donated and that would compensate. So our children lost the children, and these are APNU children of APNU parents and PBP parents and everybody. Our children, the children of our country, lost that money. And so I can go down the list. When the pensioners lost their free water, right? That's about $600 million more per year they have to pay. But $600 million we're spending on SARA, people just sitting around. And it is this sort of thing, making sure more resources go to people that matter. So that led to an explosion of expenditure on the recurrent side, non-productive expenditure. And secondly, our revenue started coming down from growth in the economy because the non-oil sectors all started tanking. And just look at the budget. If you examine the budget, you will see that almost every sector was in decline outside of the oil and gas sector. And even before COVID came along. So your job should have been to expand the non-oil sectors by producing giving them incentives so they can generate more jobs and revenue. We took away incentives from the productive sector by making capital equipment VATable. So when people buy capital, it's to a tractor, a combine, a bulldozer, in the gold mining sector, some other piece of equipment. They do that to invest and to hire more people and to create and to find gold, so then you get more taxes. If you start making it harder for people to do that, then you're destroying those sectors. That's why APNU was saying this is a private sector budget, but we just gave back the incentives to our productive sectors so we can create more jobs. In the long run, you'll get more revenue. So that is what happened. So because of this situation, we have to continue borrowing because the fiscal deficit is big, still big. As our economy starts improving again and we reboot, that would narrow, we can retire some of the debt and we will be able to, and once the oil, by 2024, 2025, that's when you start seeing a lot more money coming from the oil and gas sector. Not in these next 4 or 5 years. A lot more will come in the back end because of the contracts they signed. They didn't ring fence the expenditure. So a lot of the continued exploration for oil and gas are financed out of profit oil and stuff. So I don't want to get into that now, but that is something very, very disturbing. But it puts our revenue back end rather than front ending revenue for the government or the country. And so that is when we'd start seeing some more money at scale coming in. Right now, it's not a lot of money coming in from the oil and gas sector. So this is something, so that's how we finance it. In the immediate term, we'd have to continue borrowing for a while, and then as the economy picks up back and the oil and gas sector, we will then retire the debts and be able to finance much more expenditure.
Dr. Jagdeo, there's so much we can talk about. I
Yes.
see my guys giving me a signal. I think we probably need to do a series to talk about this stuff.
Yes, and about all of that.
Let me talk about what's happening now. We're just over 100 days in government.
Yeah.
Just as you've been saying, you've been outlining the measures. You satisfied? Has government sat down to look at what it's done in the last 100 days and projected what it wants to do coming into the future? Are you first satisfied with that? And two, when you talk about the projections, how fast does government project this economy to grow?
From what I'm seeing now, the signs are all healthy. We've cleared a ton of permits for local people whose investments have been held up because for 2.5 years they're waiting on CHNPA or the city council. That's in excess of $50 million US. That's over 10 billion local people investing. We have looked at the hotel. We had nearly 30 persons expressed interest. We've gone through every one of them. 90% have a local person, or in fact 95%, a local individual or someone as part of the project in partnership. And not 30 hotels will go for it. I think maybe 4 or 5 will get to the stage, the construction stage. But those are big name brands that will make a difference. I've seen how retail trade has started picking up just by talking to people on the imports and for Christmas. So the economy, in spite of the COVID, we've been trying to boost it. And it's going to get better. In the sugar industry, we now have several proposals to some of their states of partnership, but that will return some dynamism to to these places, like Berbice and stuff. Wales is separate. We are trying to put in place an authority there. So with our plans, it will take a year or two to really get the economy in really good shape, and a lot of hard work. But I think you're going to have a booming economy in the near future, with multiple sectors opening up. And we've been aggressively pursuing this day and night since we got into office. You mentioned 100 days, just over 100 days, but you have to remember that the first 2 months, from August 2nd to the 30th of September, we didn't have a budget. So we were working without a budget. The budget was only approved, the appropriation bill, on the 30th of September. So we worked for 60 days without any means of financing and moving forward, and implementing our program. But so it's not and then you're doing it in a COVID-related environment. So normally 100 days is the honeymoon period, not what people say how much you achieve. You get 100 days as a honeymoon. We never had the honeymoon period, You get one, and after that, people start saying, well, now we're going to give you a break for the first 100 days and not question you too much because you're just finding your way and put in. We had to do all of that and still achieve a lot. I can tell you about all the things we've done on energy side and projects and the budget and a whole range of stuff. Literally hundreds of things in different areas. We're raising money for housing. We've already laid out how we'll achieve the 50,000 house lots. We're working on the bridge projects, several of them. The 4-lane roads have advanced, work has advanced on that. So a lot of those things have been done, completed. We're going to start seeing construction activities from next year because we have to go through the formal tendering process now, but we've cleared the hurdles, the policy hurdles for a lot of these projects. So yeah, it's been a hectic few months, the last 3 months or so.
Been hectic. Yeah. Well, I wish you the best going forward, Dr. Jagdeo. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Okay. I think our next session has to definitely be strictly on energy.
Yes,
to talk about what is happening, because there's so much happening.
There are lots of things we can talk about. A lot of people want me to share. We can do that in a more political setting, though, because on where we go as a country and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right there. I should be doing a few more press conferences, and I think I do one with all of these. The F grade stuff like that we have.
That might be a bit too much to sit down and go
Yes. 100 things.
We must have another chat coming
up.
Yeah,
definitely.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jagdeo. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I am Leron Brummel. We've been chatting with Vice President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, and look out for a lot more to come in the future. Have a good one.